Hi, I'm Ellen Datlow, and I'm here to introduce three of the participants at ReaderCon, but also three of the contributors to my forthcoming anthology, When Things Get Dark, which is stories inspired by Shirley Jackson. So we're going to start. The three readers are Karen Euler, Jeffrey Ford, and Gemma Files. So first, we're going to start with Karen. Please start reading. Welcome.
Thanks, Ellen. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm going to read a story called Money of the Dead, and my name is Karen Euler. Laura and her three elderly neighbors had been living in a West Village tenement for over 40 years. They weren't close friends, but as the tenants and the rest of the five-story walk-up came and went, they clung to their shared connections to the building's history and their own place in it. Each floor had a slightly different odor, created, Stella on the fourth floor once told Laura, by the skin cells they each shed every day over the decades. She said that the cells stuck to the walls and produced an odd stippling effect after a fresh paint. There would be the smell of paint for a week, and then the old smells would creep back like spiders repairing their webs. The fifth floor has wallpaper showing through, Alberto pointed out. Stella remembered that wallpaper, with its patterns of foggy trees and mountains. She recalled the janitor who had put it up, who later fell off a ladder, who had been taken away and never came back. The four old people had, over the years, known neighbors who had died behind their closed doors. The smell had given it away. Stella, for instance, had moved into an apartment where someone had died. She still had a tendency to sniff suspiciously on damp days. It was best not to think about that. Alberto lived down the hall from Laura, and when she found a package wrapped in red paper outside her door, she naturally asked him about it. He had found one as well, as did Stella, as did Gerald on the first floor. They all contained flimsy but beautiful dollar-sized papers of various denominations with Money of the Dead written in script on them. Laura invited her neighbors over for coffee or brandy, whatever they chose, so they could discuss the situation. At first, I was afraid it was some notice from the landlord, Stella said. She was in her 80s, but stood straight and slim, with hair cut short like a boy's. Is someone pointing out that we're all old? Is that what it is? It might be a joke, Alberto agreed. There's an old story where I was born, that ghosts get tired of the places where they died and search for a nicer place to live. Ghosts are restless. And do they pay rent? Is that what the money is for? He shrugged. Someone knows the story and is making a joke? Could be. Maybe not. Maybe they're giving it to us to use it for something, Gerald said. He had a bad habit of winking, which he did then. They had all brought their packages and they sat around the table, counting and studying the money. There are no signatures on any of the bills and no serial numbers, just the amount and money of the dead and a dark image. Alberto is the most meticulous of the bunch, neat and analytical and sometimes slow. It looks like a road at sunset, Laura said. She considered herself sensitive to the arts. That would be fitting. And dark shapes at the end, indistinct. Trees, people? No one ever knows what's at the end, Alberto suggested. They had different amounts, ranging from 100 to 500, and no one knew whether it was better to have more or less of it. Who wants to have dead wealth? Were they supposed to buy something with it and pay someone for it? We should wait a day or two, Gerald said, in case we get a catalog. He winked again. Not everything is funny, Laura said. I believe this is money for the dead, Stella said. But what do they want us to do with it? Exchange it for someone who's dead? Laura asked. A sudden chill ran through each of them. Yes. Laura went through her photo albums, turning pages to look at her little boy. She had very few of Brian as an adult, and those she did have showed a steady growth of depravity. She chose one photo when Brian was 8 and studied it. He had turned into a cold, impatient man, and he had dabbled in crimes she could only imagine. He gloated about cheating people. One of his victims had killed him. She decided that having her son back, the good son, the boy she remembered, was worth every bit of money she had. She told the others what she was thinking. Don't do it, Stella said. I wouldn't. No good could come of it. But what else is the money for? They left it for us because we know so many of the dead. They gave it to us for a reason. She looked around at them, waiting for them to agree. Alberto shook his head. I don't know. There's something bad about this. Laura blushed in irritation. They had lived down the hall from each other for almost 40 years, and they had little in common. She felt very often that he disapproved of her. For what? For the failure that was her son? What else would the money be for? Laura repeated. Why else would they choose us? They looked around uneasily. Gerald even raised his eyebrows instead of winking. Stella believed they were the only ones in the building to get the money. Everyone else was young, and the dead don't matter to the young. But these four were old, and they knew some of the dead. On one side, life, on the other, death. It was almost sometimes as if they could see across the divide or hear a furtive, melancholy whistle. Their friends were there, as were their enemies. Did the dead think about them? How often? Maybe we're supposed to do something special, Alberto said, lifting his head. They had each been lost in thought. But I wouldn't be hasty. We can remember our beloved dead the usual way. Candles, prayers, no exchange. You're suggesting an exchange. I don't know what to call it, Laura said. Reaching out? That's how I think of it. Like sending money so my boy can visit me. I think we should be very cautious about this, Stella said softly. I imagine there's a right decision and a wrong decision here. And since we each have the money, we're in it together. Let's think about it some more before we act. The debate continued. Laura sat there watching it fly around from one insistent neighbor to another. They weren't going to agree that night, and she had already decided what to do. They could get angry, it didn't matter. She could recall the years when she was happiest, when Brian still loved her, and here was a chance to have it again. She thought he would come, stay for a while, and then leave, maybe fade away, like a memory. That night, she took all the money, folded it in the red paper along with a note that said, Brian, age 8, and the photograph. He was all smiles, looking happy. She placed it outside her door. Anxiety kept her awake. She was torn between feeling stupid, regretting such a risky, unpredictable move, and hope. He used to look at her with love, with unrestrained confidence. He used to check in constantly, assuming she knew everything and would always know everything. Perhaps he had never recovered from the realization that she didn't. It was so hard to believe that a cruel man had been waiting inside that gentle little boy. He had been a radiant child. What had changed that child into a thug, a monster, a bully, and a cheat? She had seen nothing. No, there was nothing to see when he was a child. None of what he would come to be. There was no point in blaming herself, was there? They had loved each other then. She had done her best with him, and he had repaid that by growing into a man who had stolen from her, threatened her, ruined people she knew, and died in a fight on a dark corner. In the middle of the night, she regretted offering all the money. Why hadn't she held some back just in case? Money might be needed for something else, something she couldn't imagine yet. She tiptoed out to the door, opened it, and saw the package was still there. A longing suddenly overtook her, a longing for the sweetest part of her life. It didn't matter how much it cost. It might be wrong to change her mind anyway. It might be insulting to remove some money. She left it. Brian was filling her head. How she missed that boy, how she missed the love they'd had for each other. No other love had rivaled that. Certainly not the love she'd had for Brian's father, who had died when Brian was 2 and had been easily forgotten. The boy had been all that mattered and had made her life whole. Such good thoughts. She slept for a while and woke with anticipation. She got up, her heart beating wildly, and opened the door. The hallway was empty. Nothing. Laura was hit by disappointment. She would not see the boy she cherished so much. She had a quick image of the adult Brian, pushed it away, and then flushed in shame. But she hated to think of him as an adult. It was better to forget what he'd become. Over time, he had changed, and she had changed too, holding herself back as the 10-year-old, the 12-year-old, the 14-year-old stared her down with contempt. She had lost control totally at 15 with his piercings and shaved head or dyed hair, his ripped clothes and the snarl in his voice. At 16, he took her money and a credit card and left, just left. She hadn't the heart to cancel her card. It was the only way she knew he was still alive until the bill came. It took her 2 years to pay it off. And after that, it got harder. Phone calls, threatening letters, all from people he had cheated, and police visits. She turned to make herself some coffee and stood staring blankly at the wall when Brian came in, rubbing his eyes, asking for cereal. "Mommy," he said. Thank you. You can read the rest of the story. Sorry, I was going to do it, Phil. You can read the rest of the story in When Things Get Dark. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you. That was great. Our next reader is Jeffrey Ford.
Jeff Ford, I'm going to read through the first part of a story that I have in the anthology called The Door in the Fence. There was an old couple who lived behind us when I was a kid, Rolly and Rita. They had the place on the other side of our back fence. Whereas most of the suburban yards were a quarter-acre, treeless grass rectangle, their lot was bigger than usual and covered with trees. Rolly was a short, stout guy with a block head and 3 days white beard. He wore glasses and his face was usually red with a distinct line of sweat on the brow. In retrospect, he looked like Hemingway from The 10th Dimension. His wife Rita was a quiet woman in a drab house dress with an apron over it. Her dark hair hadn't yet started to go white, and a faint mustache adorned either side of her upper lip. She never said much to us when we were young. Rolly was the one with the personality of sorts. He built a doorway in our back fence so we kids could go over to his yard when we wanted to ride on the giant homemade glider. It was like a chariot swinging through the breeze, and though this was about 60 years ago, I still remember the sense of freedom. The other item Rolly had that drew us through the fence was a small cannon. When I say the cannon was small, I mean the size of a toy truck. It did pack a boom and a wallop, though. Sometimes, depending on what time of day, whether Rolly was drunk or not, he kept a bottle of Chivas Regal in the well shed. We could talk him into shooting it off. On Saturday afternoons, when my father was out in the back cutting the grass or raking leaves, he would go through the fence into Rolly's yard. He'd meet up with the old man in the well shed, and they'd bullshit and drink Chivas. One time I accompanied him on this visit, and I got a seat between them, right in front of the stonework encircling the open well. Rolly told me to look into it. He said no one knew how deep it went. He instructed my father to hold me while I peered in. "It'll draw you to its heart," he said. I leaned over the stones, put my head beneath the bucket attached to the windlass. Instead of it being uniformly pitched, the view was more psychedelic, as it glowed in patches along the walls of the well, like the black light posters my brother and I had. "There's lights," I said. "It's some kind of lichen or mold," Rolly said. "That well has been here a long time. The house is 150 years old. I imagine the well, in one form or another, would have to be a lot older." "Do you drink from it?" my father asked. "Are you kidding? This is my water right here." He dashed off what was left in his glass. My father followed suit, and then they poured a couple more. I met Rolly when I was about 5, and he went the way of all Rollies when I was around 10. I recall him showing us his photos from World War II and photos of his dog Mumps. I don't think I went to the funeral. My parents probably did. As far as I remember, it was like Rolly was there, and then he wasn't. The cannon was probably still there unless they buried it with him. The glider was also still there, but we no longer went through the fence. Someone had nailed the door shut from the other side. We were sure it was Rita, who didn't want us playing in her yard. With that, a whole episode of my life fell away and drifted off. Once in a rare while, usually in winter, I'd look down through the empty tree branches into their yard from our upstairs bathroom window. No matter how many times I did, I never saw a single footprint in the snow. I'd watch the glider swing back and forth empty, and it would bring to mind the sound of the cannon going off in some distant other country of my memory. At the end of the following summer, I was in the car with my mother. We were driving back from the grocery store when a bike pulled out of one of the side streets right in front of our car. My mother hit the brakes hard, and she dropped a cigarette into her lap. Retrieving it, she said, "Could you possibly?" which was one of her stock lines for any kind of bullshit life threw at her. I was in the back seat, and pre-seat belts for kids I'd smashed my face into the headrest of the seat in front of me. As I was rubbing my forehead, I looked out the front windshield and noticed the bike rider was more familiar close up. I tapped my mother on the shoulder and pointed. "It's Rita," she said, and we watched in silence and followed as she pedaled up the street, her white muumuu flowing. She'd lost the apron, but gained a pair of green moccasins and a pair of knee-length white athletic socks. Just before we pulled into the driveway, Rita lifted her legs in front of her and rested them on the top of the handlebars. My mother tooted the horn in appreciation of the stunt. Later at the dinner table, my mother told my father what we'd witnessed. He'd widened his eyes but said nothing. "She's like 66 now," said my mother. "I guess since Rolly's gone, this is her idea of stepping out. While he was still alive, I never saw her do anything but sit out on the glider with her hands folded in her lap and her hairnet squeezing her head too tight." For the rest of the summer and then autumn and through the winter, we spotted Rita at every and any time of the day or night riding that old bike. High, wide handlebars, pedal brakes, reflector on the back, basket in front, one of those bells you work with your thumb instead of a horn. She pedaled fiercely, undeterred by rain or snow, as if the work of her legs was responsible for the motion of the sun and moon and stars. In the winter, she put a woolen Rangers hockey hat over her hairnet, and she wore a padded insulated jacket, black rubber boots over the moccasins. More than once during this time, I heard my mother say, "Well, I gotta hand it to her, she's getting in great shape." When I looked down at her yard through the leafless branches now, I'd see her shovel the snow from the concrete drive to her garage, and once it was clear, she'd go back and forth the length of it sideways, doing the karaoke step like they made us do in football practice. At other times, I'd see her on the cold cement, her knuckles pressed into it, doing push-ups. This was all rather odd for the late 1960s, especially for a woman closing in on 70. To tell the truth, though, as entertaining as watching Rita was, she was low on my list of real interests. The way I experienced her was more like brief bouts of surprise. She'd pop into my field of view and quickly pop out, and my teen head would backfill and obscure her. There was one incident, though, that happened in early spring and made an impression. I was in the car again, this time with my father. We were heading home down our block, and we had to creep along because there was a guy running right in the middle of the road in front of us. My father, in situations like this, just chilled. He didn't beat the horn, he didn't get pissed off, he just drove slowly. He told me once it was a way of being he'd learned in the Army, since you always had to wait on line for everything. Eventually, the runner, dressed in a sweatshirt with the arms cut off, sweatpants, grocery store sneakers, realized there was a car a few feet behind and moved out of the way. We passed him, and lo and behold, it wasn't a guy after all. It was Rita, but she had her dark hair cut into a crew, and the mustache that had always been poised to happen wasn't waiting any longer. Her biceps were impressive for such thin arms. She wore a red headband and a whistle on a string around her neck. "Who's that?" said my father. "It's Rita," I said. He drove a few yards, checked the rearview mirror, and said, "Yikes." It seemed that she stayed with running for a year. My mother, working on her fifth glass of sherry, cigarette in hand, opined from a spot in the dining room. "I saw Rita yesterday. I think she's getting younger." "Crazy is obviously good for your health," said my father. "She doesn't stop long enough for death to snatch her." The two of them would be dead in 15 years, at 60 and 61. Rita was moving towards 70, looking like an aged Charles Bronson. You could see she was old, but she was ripped, and she moved with agility and speed. Not grace, though, as she had a slight limp in her gait from the time Rolly set the cannon off just as she walked in front of it, and it gave her a great and lasting punch in the thigh. A movement side to side, the motion of her arms when she ran, was like a crab playing the violin. At summer, as summer came on again, the first Saturday after start of vacation, I took my bike early in the morning over to the grade school around the corner. There was a lot of concrete there that was good to ride on. When I crossed the basketball court and looked toward the school, I saw into the alcove created by the giant brick box of the gym jutting out from the main building and the lower wall of the cafeteria. There was Rita playing against herself in handball. I stopped my bike to bear witness. She had on a pair of black gloves with no fingers, a black leather biker vest over a white men's t-shirt, a red headband. Her hair had grown out frizzy, a pair of gym shorts with the local high school's iconic lion on the left leg, and those crappy sneakers. She moved around the asphalt, suddenly jumping side to side, talking to herself. I think she was celebrating her best shots. And she was, "Here we go," she'd say, and slam the ball against the wall with her left hand. At least in her mind, the game was on. I took off before she spotted me. And all the time I had been intermittently, half unconsciously charting Rita's changes. There'd never been an instance when anyone in our family had spoken with her. Sometimes my mom would wave and beep the horn when driving by, while Rita was either running or on the bike. Never once did she acknowledge the gesture, which was odd because before Rolly died, although she'd been quiet and often stood on her side, which was odd because before Rolly died, although she'd been quiet, she often stood on her side of the back fence and chatted with my mom on the occasions both would be hanging laundry. In late June, my mother came home from the grocery store one day and told us Rita had been on the warpath there. Apparently, she had the manager of the deli department up against the wall and was threatening because the cold cut scale didn't show the shopper what the weight of their purchase was. It had long been broken and an issue at the store, but the deli guy, who was tall and broad, was such a bully no one did anything about it. My mother said Rita had him by the tie and was pulling his head down to her level. She was shouting at him, spit flying from her lips. She had on her Hell's Angels outfit. I'm pretty sure my mother meant her leather vest and black handball gloves. The police were called, and when my mother saw them pull up outside, she walked over to Rita and took her by the arm. Softly, she whispered, "It's okay, I think he's got the message." She led her down the aisle and took her out the back door as the police entered through the front. She told us Rita never once said a word to me, but the minute she hit fresh air, she took off running at a dead sprint. I'm telling you, her arm was as hard as a rock. I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great. Okay. And our next reader is Gemma Files. Please welcome.
Hello. I'm going to be reading from a story called Pair of Anguish. Know what a pair of anguish is? Imogen asked me that last day we spent together, and I shook my head. I'll show you. Take a look. She opened up her book and thumbed through it quickly, spreading its dog-eared pages to display two illustrations set next to each other, one a sketch, the other a photograph. Both were indeed roughly pear-shaped as advertised. The one on the right spread out in petals, weirdly organic, while the one on the left was black iron, spiked all over, sharper outside than in. You use the screw here, she said, pointing. Tamp it down tight and thrust it up inside, any place that's big enough to take it. Could be the mouth, like a gag. That's why people in Holland called it a choke pear. But other people, they say they used it during the burning times on women down there. Jesus, that's gross, I said. Seriously, what? Why? Why would anybody stick that inside somebody, pull the screw, let it open up, see what happened? Her eyes were still on the page, half slit and dreamy, like she was hypnotized. It's no different than cutting yourself, Una. All on the inside, though, instead of the outside. No scars, none that show. And somebody else doing it to you instead of you doing it to yourself, I pointed out. Cutting, I could have said, would have said later on when I finally knew how to say things like that out loud, was all about control in a world without it. Hurt yourself to dim or stem the pain you already knew was coming. What kind of control would shit like this give you? It's dumb, I told her finally. That'll kill you. Totally different. Imogen smiled then, her smile that looked more like a snarl, skewed left and upwards, in a way that made her look as if she was having a stroke. Like you've never thought about it, she replied. Steal your mom's booze and a bunch of pills so it wouldn't hurt as much. Slit your wrists the right way. Let them find you like that. I used to plan on setting myself on fire with the gas can my dad kept in our shed back in Gananoque, but it's harder here. Why not throw yourself off the bridge? You wanted that bad. Maybe, one day, maybe. Around us, the ravine wasn't quiet so much as full of a very different sort of noise. As part of a system of watersheds, downtown Toronto sat over top. The section we knew best ran underneath the St. Clair Avenue East Bridge, bisecting our shared neighborhood for a mile in either direction. Trace it far enough south and it blended into Rosedale, eventually becoming part of the Don Valley Parkway, which an enterprising hiker might trace almost right on down to Lake Ontario. The trees grew so close they strangled the sky, and the creek rushed by at full flood over rocks and trash, striking liquid against the runoff tunnel's concrete walls. Green dusk here at the bottom of the slope, true dusk starting to show up above. The insects sang and the leaves rustled, and for half a heartbeat I thought I heard a cicada whine so loud it cut through my skull like a skewer. Seriously, I said at last, don't be so fucking stupid. Don't pretend like it even matters how. You'd still be just as dead. Sure, but think about how they'd all feel if we did. From me to we in one small slide, that was Imogen all over. They'd laugh at us, is all, I told her. After a long minute, look sad in public, make fun of us in private for being weak-ass losers who couldn't stay alive long enough to get into high school, like usual. But Imogen just simply sat there, studying those horrible pictures as if she thought somebody was going to test her on them later, ignoring me entirely. The very first day I met Imogen, I followed her down under the St. Clair West Bridge without even thinking, twice, straight into the ravine's heart. Sorry about that. She let herself out of the recreation yard through a crack in the fence and moved downwards into the green shadows through the weeds that grew big as bushes, clumps of nettle and deadly nightshade, scrums of birch with big torn strips of bark hanging down from their trunks like loose bandages. There was a path, but she avoided it, preferring to make her own. I'd been coming back from lunch when I spotted her, still reading that book she'd been nursing under her desk all day in the corner of the recreation yard, ignoring a clod of popular girls discussing her, from near enough to make it obvious, yet far enough away to make objecting to being discussed more work than it was worth. I didn't know any of their names yet, but I recognized their faces from earlier. I didn't know anybody here yet, given I hadn't known I was changing schools until Mom had told me the week before, when she picked me up at the airport after coming back from Melbourne, only to take me home to a completely different house from the one I'd left a month before. You'll like it, Una, my mom told me. It's a whole fresh start. Sure, I agreed. No point in arguing. Arguing never helped. 1 p.m. on day one at the new school near the new house, and the only one in class whose name I'd managed to learn thus far, besides the teacher, Miss Huergath, roughly my height but twice my width, sporting red plastic frames and a big cross at her neck, was Imogen, who nobody seemed to like and everybody seemed to be afraid of. She didn't seem all that scary to me, but then again, why would she? Usually I was that kid. That alone made me want to follow her and see what all the fuss was. And what did you do over the summer, Imogen? Miss Huergath had asked that morning after the national anthem was over and we'd all sat down again. I followed her gaze to see who she was curving her mouth at and found it was a girl sitting almost beside me, head cocked and long, pale hair, half shading her face, eyes glued to whatever she had in her hands. She barely looked up, flicked her eyes back and forth before replying. I spent most of my time reading mythology, she said. Norse, Greek, Egyptian, Aztec, African, Christian. Christianity isn't mythology, Miss Huergath said. Imogen twitched one shoulder, not quite a shrug, but not quite not one. All right, she said. One of the other girls snorted. But why? She asked, as if the answer implied because you're the most giant geek, whoever geeked, obviously. And for a minute, she seemed like she might go on, but Miss Huergath raised her hand instead and snapped her fingers at the same time, silencing her. Jennifer Diamond, Miss Huergath said, do we talk out of turn in this class? No, we do not. And then she was turning my way, scanning the attendance sheet. So she began, Una, is it? And how did you spend your vacation? Everybody looked at me then, the way I'd been praying they wouldn't, freezing the breath in my lungs and the thoughts in my brain together at once for one painfully long moment as I struggled to form my next sentence. In Australia, I told her at last when I was able. My dad lives there, which drew a snicker, of course, courtesy of what sounded like the same girl as before. Australia? But why? I felt my face heat, all my pimples flaring up at once, and tried to distract myself from the strong, immediate urge to throw something at her by looking back at Imogen, whose eyes were back on her book. That was good. I remember thinking how I wanted to know what the title was, whether it was one I'd already read, and tried to crane my neck to see, but the light on the spine was too strong for me to make anything out, even if she hadn't had it open so wide. Around us, the class went on, with Miss Huergas, Q&A, a steady drone, busy dumb as bees in a hive, and I was able to sink back into myself, invisible, or at least as much as I ever could be, me with my adult height and full pubertal shift at age 10 and a half, almost 11, me so gawky and inconveniently well-developed, my face painfully sunburned from that last trip to the beach before boarding the flight back to Toronto. I still wore the horrible navy blue acrylic turtleneck I'd spent a day and a night traveling home in, if only so nobody had to gape at those long strings of red-brown skin working their way off the back of my neck and into my cleavage, let alone the scars on the insides of my wrists.
Thank you. Everyone look at the chat. We actually have some extra time.
Okay.
I don't know why Zoom gave it to us, but they gifted it to us. So now let's talk. I don't know how much time we actually have, but they said, you want more time? We're giving it to you. It's like, okay. You want to just talk about maybe something about Jackson, what inspires you about her work, and maybe your favorite story or novel. Whoever wants to go first. Gemma, you want to start?
Okay, sure. I think probably my favorite novel is, well, it's probably Hill House. But what I admire about her most is the way that her work really centers around women. And that was one of the things that inspired me in terms of writing this story. You know, outsiders, obviously, people who are falling between the cracks of like some kind of social interaction. But yeah, women, women, girls, women to be. It's a very weirdly sort of gynosocial.
Okay.
Yeah. And I also really like how liminal it is. There's a lot of stuff that's said between the lines,
Oh, absolutely.
and that's a really interesting challenge as a writer.
Yeah. Jeff, Karen, anything you want to say?
Go ahead, Karen.
Well, I'm going to go for Hill House as well, which I think I read it somewhere in probably mid to late teens. And it was probably the first frightening book I ever read. And it was wonderful. And the language was wonderful. And the eeriness was wonderful. One of the things that stayed with me the longest time, if you remember that scene where Eleanor is in bed and she reaches her hand out and another hand, she believes it's her friend's hand, and then her friend calls from another room. That scene is just so amazing to me and impressed me so much. And the language was so great. So like a million other people, I memorized the first paragraph to Hill House. No live organism can continue. And I've always loved that paragraph, and I teach as an adjunct for NYU occasionally. And there was one class where I was using setting as character, but also language. And I said, for instance, this is the opening. And I started reciting it, the opening paragraph of Hill House, because I had memorized it decades before, but I had memorized it so long before and never had occasion to use it that I stopped in the middle and realized that I couldn't remember the rest of it. And from the back of the room, someone else picked up where I left off and just continued and finished the paragraph, because there were a lot of us out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
that's beautiful.
Yeah. And
Oh.
that's my story about how much I love Shirley Jackson and Hill House.
Yeah.
About 5 or 6 years ago, they had this thing at the KGB where it was for the Shirley Jackson Awards, I think. And somebody read the lottery out loud. I think it was what's his name, New Yorker. Who was it, Ellen? You were there. It was Jack Womack, I think.
Oh, okay.
Read it out loud. Do you remember that? And
No.
I said to myself,
But I've been memory like a sieve.
when he got done with it, I thought to myself, man, there was so many different possibilities in this story that I thought I had them all covered from like grade school on, because that story is used every year almost in grade school. You know what I mean? And
Mm.
there was just so many more possibilities in it. And then I went on and I read other stuff, and the subtlety, and this is what I think Gemma was talking about, the stuff between the lines, the unsaid things. I read a story called Cauliflower in Her Hair, which is um, about the abuse of these young girls by this guy who was the father of one of them. But and how creepy the whole thing was. But you could miss that part of it so easily if you rush through it. So I think it taught me that Jackson is definitely worthy of many, many readings, and she's got there's sub basements to her sub basements. So
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, her stuff seems to be so exact,
yeah,
but there's so much inside of it
Yeah.
hiding.
I think that's one of the things I like the most about her.
I mean, I really liked An Ordinary Day with Peanuts. And I mean, of course, everyone read The Lottery, but for some reason, I really liked that one. And I was just recently asked for an interview what was, my favorite. What do I think her influence is on contemporary writers or everyone since her, not necessarily people in the book, but anybody. And I realized, I mean, that what I love about the story is you can read it overtly as just, some people chatting and saying what they did by the day, but it's actually so much more than that. I mean, it's about the randomness of life. It's about, to me, these people are gods or God split. And I thought, and it made me think of Clive Barker's story. Oh, I can't remember the name of it, but about this cabal of people running the world, and in the basement or someplace, there's people watching frogs jump. They're having frogs do things, and they basically what they plan is dependent on what the frogs do. And I don't know. I mean, I have to assume that Clive was actually maybe influenced by Jackson, the story. I mean, I have to ask him at some point. And but again, it seems clever, but it is clever, but I guess to me it's obvious that it's God's. But I don't know, if you first read it as a kid, maybe you don't realize that. So that's, yeah, her subtlety and the layers within layers. And I also loved We Have Always Lived in the Castle. I read that.
Yeah.
I read that as a kid, and I have not read it since, and I know I need to, but I just don't have the time. And what I remember is how I love Mary Cat. I mean, she was just like, the whole thing was like hit my grotesque. It got me into the grotesque. All these things that I read as I was young, and that was one of them, made me appreciate the weirdness of weird and horror fiction. And that was one that I liked. I don't even know if I read Hill House years ago. I think I read it more recently, but I know I didn't read it as a kid. I mean, I saw the movie, The Haunting, but I don't know if I don't remember reading the actual book.
I got onto it, sad to say, through Stephen King because I read. Yeah.
Nothing wrong with Stephen King.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I read Salem's Lot, which, quotes liberally from Hill House at the beginning. And then I moved on to Hill House. Yeah, I mean, what I love about Maricat, and what I'm sure a lot of women love about Maricat, is the freedom of the female sociopath.
Yes.
The person who's like, yeah, no, it's all about me. Yeah. It's all about me. There's nothing else.
Right.
It's like me and the people I like.
Yeah, and I love what Paul Tremblay did with A Head Full of Ghosts. I mean, to me, I said, "Oh my God, this is We Have Always Lived in the Castle." Maricat here. Yeah, so that was great.
Well, she's also one of my heroes of people who early on, and being in the minority, you know what I mean?
You mean Jackson, right? You don't mean Maricat.
What?
You mean
Jackson?
Shirley Jackson.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, she's one of the people who erased the boundary between weird and speculative fiction and literature.
Yeah, she did everything. She wrote everything.
Yeah.
it out, and she's one of those people at that time period who, where that whole thing began. You know,
Right. Yeah. Um, but I realized we don't have unlimited time because we only have 50 minutes for the reading thing. So we have 9 minutes or so. But who's on my apartment? Where's that coming from? Fire.
That's for me. Sorry about that.
It's okay. I'm on the 9th floor now, so I can't hear anything, which is great.
Yeah.
Did any of you see the horrible movie? I mean, I'm judging it now. I thought it was a horrible movie, Shirley Jackson. I mean, I thought it was a travesty of her life.
There are 3 or 4 of them.
No, the most recent one with Elizabeth.
Oh, no.
The acting was great, but
Shirley.
Shirley.
Yeah. I haven't seen it yet.
I watched it and I really was looking forward to it. And it's not about her life. It's just kind of basically a story within her oeuvre in a way, but it's disappointing because I think it misrepresents who she was. And I find that, and I really resent that. So I'm wondering how actually a family feels about how she and her husband were depicted in that. But none of you have seen it. I recommend you see it, but it's interesting, but
I think you have to have a particular streaming service to see it, and I do not have that particular streaming service.
I think it might have been on Amazon Prime or something. I don't even remember. But I got, So, but anyway, okay. So we're running out of time now. And I want to thank you all. The book is coming out September 21st from Titan in the UK and the US. Any reviewers can now look for it. A NetGalley in the US and UK, and apparently Edelweiss. They all have downloadable copies for reviewers. And I'm really excited about the book coming out. Can you think of anything else we should say?
No, I'm really excited that you included me in this, that
I'm
you
really
asked
glad
me
it
for
happened.
something.
I mean, people are, everyone complains when I can't have them in all my books. It's like I can't have all in all my books. I have to figure out who maybe write for which book, and sometimes you get a wild card who you have no idea someone would be actually interested in that. Like when I got Delia Sherman to write about Poe, who knew? But anyway, so I'm glad you're in the book, and John Langan couldn't make it. We'll take him off the program thing. But anyway. Hope I see you all at ReaderCon whenever it is, 2 weekends. Whenever it is.
Artwork, your recent artwork online.
What about recent artwork?
No, I said to Gemma, I love your recent artwork online. You're gonna keep.
Oh, thank you.
Now that the pandemic's over, you're gonna keep that up.
Yes, actually, I am.
Yeah.
I actually really enjoy painting. So.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
hold on. Let's just say goodbye. We can stay on. We can keep talking, but let me shut off the recording. Okay.
All right.
Anyway, thank you everyone for coming, and please read the book.